We come this week as we conclude the church and liturgical year with Christ the King Sunday and prepare ourselves for Advent. We know that the holiday season is upon us. As we enter into the season of the holidays, beginning with Thanksgiving, we're reminded of all the trappings of holidays. Those holiday dinners with new in-laws and other new people included in those dinners is a phenomenon that we've all had to navigate or has been navigated on our behalf. We're always worried about how the family might accept the new person, which may be us, and how that new person might judge the family that they are becoming accustomed to. There's a lot of onboarding and learning that has to go on, and it makes for sometimes some awkward but memorable experiences. In this week's passage, we see a similar, what could be possibly awkward but memorable circumstance. In this week's passage, David strangely shows compassion to a man named Mephibosheth. Now, why is it strange? Because in the ancient Near East culture, the new king would eliminate all the close relatives and allies of the former king, lest his reign become challenged. And even if the new king didn't eliminate the previous ruling family by exile or by execution, he certainly was not intended to have compassion and provide for them. So it is remarkable that David chooses to break with this tradition. And the question we must ask is why? Why does David break with this tradition? Because for Mephibosheth, he's Uncle David. Not that he's blood related, but he is actually an uncle to Mephibosheth by being married to Mephibosheth's aunt, and also by being a close friend, almost a brother, to Mephibosheth's father, Jonathan. David is like a brother to Jonathan, one that is a best friend that remains closer than a brother. David, in previous passages, has promised to care for Jonathan and for Jonathan's family. David knew that Mephibosheth now had no father in the death of Jonathan, and when finding out that Mephibosheth is handicapped, he realizes that this is just one more tough break in Mephibosheth's life. David, unlike other kings, unlike even Mephibosheth's grandfather Saul, was not a jealous and cruel king, but rather a compassionate one. David acts mercifully towards Mephibosheth. He makes sure to provide for him in all kinds of ways. He knows that with his handicap, Mephibosheth can't work the land. So he asks for one of Saul's former servants and their family to run the farm for Mephibosheth. This way Mephibosheth has some money and means provided to him, but also David gives Mephibosheth a place of status by inviting him to feast at his table. David wants Mephibosheth to know that he is indeed cared for and loved. Most would pity Mephibosheth and leave him alone, but David actively makes sure that Mephibosheth has family and meets the needs of being a support system for him, since seemingly Mephibosheth had none left in the death of his father Jonathan and grandfather Saul. This reminds us of the earlier Thanksgiving, the first Thanksgiving story that most of us know from school. While the pilgrims were celebrating God's provision for their first year with a feast of thanksgiving to God, a handful of their friendly neighbors, the Powhatans, came to the table and feasted with them. While many other white Europeans had mistreated and disparaged the Native Americans as savages, these pilgrims showed kindness, as the Powhatans had previously shown them kindness the winter before. These white and native peoples united together as one people to celebrate the community that they had fostered with one another, because God in His providence had placed them together, and they gave thanks to God for accomplishing this task. All of this, the story of David and Mephibosheth, and the Thanksgiving story that we know, are examples of God's kindness at His table. We are able to experience restoration and God's presence through specific channels of His grace. As we are immersed in the study of Scriptures, through meaningful and intentional prayers, and the sacrament of communion, we may more fully experience God's restorative power in our lives. We also prove our love and thanksgiving through joyful obedience to those activities that we might glorify God out of that obedience. With one of those specific channels, it is a reminder of thanksgiving. The sacrament of communion is also known in other traditions as the Eucharist. The word Eucharist means thanksgiving. It is an act of thanksgiving. Jesus, through the act of the Last Supper, the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, all of these the same thing, are a giving of thanks to God for what He has done. Jesus in this sacrament invites His disciples, and as He says, friends, who by extension includes us, to feast at His table, not through anything that we have done, but out of His great love and compassion for us. Jesus does this even at the first celebration of this sacrament. He feasts with everyone, including the one who would betray Him. You would think that since He knew Judas's plans, that He would have given Judas some other activity to do that night. But no, He includes Judas along with everyone else. Judas eats supper with the rest of them. Even knowing this, even knowing what will happen with Judas, Jesus includes him as part of that celebration. Jesus does this as an extension of grace and a reminder of us that we should be encouraged to do the same. Jesus, for us, through His works, has taken away our shame, has overlooked our brokenness and our handicaps, and provides for us, because that thing that would handicap us, which is sin, would keep us from fully achieving what we should be. And in doing so, out of that grace and inviting us to be at His table, Jesus has given us the right to be called children of God. On this Christ the King Sunday, the final Sunday of the church and liturgical year, the church reminds itself once again of God's ultimate power over each and every one, and the freedom that is possible that He delivers unto us out of His compassion, love, and grace. Our salvation comes not through military, economic, or physical strength, but through the suffering, death, and resurrection as an extension of grace of Jesus Christ, now and forever. Amen.